This truth exists beyond language, beyond the appearance of control that the human mind tries to maintain. When a man misses someone, he might hide behind composure, restraint, or distraction, but his energy quietly betrays what he truly feels. Words can be measured and chosen, energy cannot. It moves before thought, speaks before expression, and reveals before confession. The subtle shifts in tone, the timing of his messages, the softness in his eyes, or the stillness in his presence. These are the invisible languages that speak the truth his ego might wish to conceal. When someone's absence begins to echo in the heart, the body remembers even when the mind resists. The energy field around a person changes. It becomes restless, searching, and quietly drawn toward where comfort once lived. He might tell himself he is fine, that detachment is strength, that control is maturity. Yet energy has no interest in appearing strong, it only seeks alignment with truth. This is why the feeling of missing someone cannot be fully hidden. It manifests not through declarations but through vibrations. How he breathes when her name appears, how he pauses before sending a message, how his tone softens when speaking of certain memories. Energy is the purest reflection of the emotional world. It operates beneath awareness, but shapes every action. A man who misses someone might maintain silence, yet his attention still flows in her direction. He may watch from a distance, unconsciously checking if she is fine, if her world still remembers him. His energy moves subtly through thoughts and emotions, seeking connection without the courage to expose vulnerability. It is not manipulation, it is the silent nature of longing. Energy naturally returns to what feels familiar, to where it once found warmth and belonging. People often misunderstand why energy speaks louder than words. Words belong to the conscious mind where logic, fear, and social conditioning operate. Energy belongs to the subconscious where authenticity lives. The conscious mind can lie, suppress, or act. The subconscious cannot. It holds the imprint of every genuine emotion. When someone tries to suppress love, care, or longing, the energy doesn't vanish. It transforms into signs, dreams, or an unexplainable pull toward the person they miss. This is why one can sense when someone is thinking of them, even without communication. It is the resonance of two energies that once shared a rhythm trying to reconnect again. To understand this, one must observe energy not as mysticism, but as awareness. Energy is the sum of one's presence, the emotional tone that lingers when words have faded. If you have ever felt someone looking at you before turning to see them, or suddenly thought of someone right before they reached out, you have experienced energy communication. When a man misses you, his energy naturally seeks you through such unseen channels. You might feel a sudden wave of calm, a thought of him arising without reason, or an emotional warmth when his energy aligns with yours for a moment. But the beauty of energy is also its honesty. It does not hide behind pride. A man might act indifferent, post pictures of happiness, or talk about moving on. But his energy will tell a different story. His laughter may sound slightly forced. His social presence might appear vibrant yet hollow. Because when the heart's frequency shifts, it cannot synchronize with superficial vibrations. You can feel it when someone's smile no longer matches their eyes, when their energy feels heavy even in moments of joy. The more he tries to hide his feelings, the louder his energy becomes to those who are attuned. Energy carries intention. Every action, even the smallest one, reveals the truth of that intention. When he suddenly reaches out to ask something trivial, the real message isn't in the words, it's in the energy behind them. It is his way of reconnecting, of testing the space between you without admitting his longing. When he checks old photos or revisits familiar places, his energy returns there because those memories still hold part of his emotional self. Energy is loyal to what once nourished it. It circles back to unfinished emotions, to unspoken words, to the places where presence was once shared in peace. To perceive this, one must learn stillness. Most people only listen to words but ignore energy. Yet it is in silence that energy becomes visible. When you quiet the mind and observe without judgment, you begin to sense the truth of people's states. You notice how their presence feels before they even speak. This awareness allows you to see beyond appearances, to know when someone's strength is genuine or when it is a shield, when their calm is peace or avoidance. Energy teaches discernment without needing evidence. When a man misses you, his energy softens. The walls he built begin to vibrate with memory. His actions may remain guarded, but his frequency shifts from resistance to openness. You can sense it in the pauses, the glances, the hesitation before goodbye. Energy always tries to find its original harmony. It doesn't care for pride or appearances. It seeks truth. This is why emotional connection cannot be erased through silence or time. If a bond was real, its energy remains alive, flowing quietly beneath the surface until it is either healed or expressed. Understanding that energy never lies invites compassion. Instead of reacting to a man's behavior, his silence, his distance, his pretense, you begin to feel what lies beneath it. You see the human struggle between vulnerability and control, between truth and defense. Missing someone is not weakness, it is the proof of feeling, the evidence that something genuine once existed. Energy simply preserves that truth until the person is ready to face it. The awareness of energy also teaches patience. You no longer need to chase answers or demand clarity. You begin to trust that everything real will reveal itself through presence, not performance. Energy moves naturally toward honesty, and in time, it always exposes what words have tried to hide. When you understand this, you begin to observe the world differently. Every interaction becomes a reading of energy rather than language. You sense who truly cares, who carries you in thought, who speaks from alignment rather than impulse. Energy never lies because it is the pure reflection of consciousness. It mirrors where attention flows, where love resides, and where attachment still breathes. When a man misses you, you will feel it not through words but through vibration. The quiet weight of unspoken emotion that moves through the air between two souls who once understood each other without needing to speak. This is the quiet conflict within every human being who has ever cared deeply and then been separated from what they love. The mind wants control, structure, and logic. It protects by creating walls. The heart, however, moves in the opposite direction. It remembers connection, warmth, and belonging. Where the mind builds distance to survive, the heart continues to reach across that space, searching for reunion not through words, but through feeling. It is this tension between mental defense and emotional truth that shapes much of human behavior when longing begins to stir. When a man misses someone, it is rarely visible in the ways the world expects. The mind tells him to stay composed, to appear unmoved, to act as though life continues effortlessly. It convinces him that control is power and that emotion is weakness. But beneath that structure, the heart begins to whisper. It remembers small details that logic cannot erase. The sound of laughter, the calmness that presence brought, the quiet reassurance of simply being understood. The mind may instruct him to forget, yet the heart does not operate under command. It continues to seek what made it feel alive because the heart values connection over control. The mind, built to protect, interprets missing someone as vulnerability. It prefers distance because distance promises safety. It analyzes reasons and explains away emotion with stories of practicality. It says, it's better this way, or you must focus on yourself. These statements are not lies, they are shields. The mind creates them to keep one from feeling the intensity of loss. But no matter how much logic the mind constructs, the heart quietly disassembles it in its own time. The heart has no interest in safety. It moves toward what feels truthful. It doesn't calculate risk or measure outcome. It simply moves toward resonance. This is why emotional distance can never fully sever the invisible thread between two people who once shared real connection. The mind might manage behavior, avoid contact, stay busy, fill the silence with distractions. But the heart continues to send signals through energy and memory. When he pauses in thought, she returns. When a familiar song plays, the heart answers before the mind can stop it. The return is not always physical. Sometimes it happens through awareness, through the soft ache that reminds him that something meaningful was left unresolved. The heart doesn't chase people. It seeks peace, and it can only find peace by acknowledging where love still lives. When the mind creates distance, it uses time as its tool. It tells itself that with enough days, weeks, or months, the feeling will fade. But time does not heal what has not been understood. The heart does not measure healing through duration, it heals through acceptance. It does not forget, it integrates. When a man truly misses someone, his mind may keep him from reaching out, but his heart keeps him from forgetting. He may appear calm, even indifferent, but inside, a quiet dialogue continues between the two forces. The mind says, move on, while the heart asks, but what if something real was left behind? This dialogue has no winner, it only teaches awareness. In moments of solitude, when noise fades and the distractions lose their grip, the heart begins to speak more clearly. It speaks in feeling, not in words. A wave of nostalgia, a sudden dream, an emotion that surfaces without reason. These are the languages of return. The heart is not bound by logic or distance. It remembers energy, and energy transcends time. When the mind tries to silence emotion, it may succeed for a while, but suppression does not equal release. What is repressed in thought continues to live in the heart's frequency, shaping perception, dreams, and even physical energy. The mind wants closure, the heart wants connection. This difference creates much of the confusion that follows separation. The mind seeks to understand why, while the heart simply feels what is. The more the mind analyzes, the more it becomes trapped in its own narratives. The heart, however, remains honest. It doesn't justify or explain. It knows only the truth of feeling. That is why those who live entirely from the mind often feel emptiness even after doing all the right things to move on. They may have distance, but not peace. Peace comes only when the heart has been heard. The heart seeking is not about returning to a person, but returning to truth. When it misses someone, it is not only recalling the person, it is recalling the state of being that connection created. It longs for authenticity, for the simplicity of being seen and accepted. The mind can simulate progress, but it cannot replicate that depth of presence. The heart seeks return, not to repeat the past, but to rediscover itself through love's reflection. Every longing then becomes an invitation to understand oneself more deeply, to see what still needs to be healed, released, or expressed. In this way, missing someone is not weakness but awareness. It shows that something within still values intimacy and truth. The mind can dismiss it as nostalgia, but the heart recognizes it as remembrance. The pull to return is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It is the soul reminding the person of what was once pure before the noise of thought interfered. The heart does not judge, it only reflects. It returns to where energy once flowed freely because it seeks balance again. When the mind and heart eventually align, peace follows. But before alignment, there is friction. The mind says, forget, and the heart says, remember. The mind says, be logical, and the heart says, be real. This tension teaches humility. It reveals how much of human suffering is not caused by love itself, but by resistance to it. When one stops resisting, distance begins to dissolve. The person might still be physically apart, but emotionally there is space for understanding rather than denial. A man who misses someone might never speak it, but his energy begins to shift toward reconciliation. His thoughts soften, his defenses loosen, his curiosity returns. The mind may still hesitate, but the heart quietly leads him back. Not necessarily to the same relationship, but to a state of openness. The return the heart seeks is not always about another person. It is about returning to authenticity, to vulnerability, to the parts of himself he closed off when he built those mental walls. The distance was never truly between him and her, it was between him and his own truth. When he begins to understand that the mind creates distance but the heart seeks return, something begins to awaken within him. He sees that his protection cost him connection, that his silence created misunderstanding, that his logic could not silence longing. The realization doesn't arrive as thought. It arrives as stillness, as a quiet knowing that love was never the weakness he feared, but the teacher he resisted. And in that realization, even without words, the energy begins to move again, slowly, humbly, but always toward truth. Every movement, every hesitation, every repeated pattern reveals what the mind tries to conceal. The ego speaks in loud words, in defenses, in stories carefully built to protect identity. But actions, quiet and unintentional, speak from a deeper place, the truth that lives beneath pride, fear, and self-preservation. When a man misses someone, he might convince himself that he has moved on, that he is unaffected, that silence equals strength. Yet his actions will always tell another story. The small gestures, the sudden appearances, the subtle changes in behavior, they are the whispers of what the ego refuses to admit aloud. The ego is a mask, and its purpose is survival. It seeks to protect the image one has built of oneself, strong, independent, unshaken. But longing challenges that illusion. Missing someone threatens the ego because it reveals dependency, tenderness, and vulnerability. It reminds a man that beneath all control, there exists a heart capable of attachment. So the ego begins to construct narratives. It wasn't meant to be, or I'm better off without her. These stories give him distance from his own feeling. But while the words create distance, his actions begin to contradict them. The energy of longing slips through the cracks of control and appears in behaviors he cannot fully explain. He might find himself checking her social presence without reason, returning to familiar places, or listening to songs once shared. Each action is small, seemingly meaningless, but each one carries emotional intent. He tells himself it's nothing, just curiosity, yet the repetition of these actions exposes something deeper. The ego hides emotion behind logic, but the body and behavior remain honest. They reveal what the conscious mind tries to suppress. Actions are like reflections, the mirror of the inner state that cannot be spoken. When words and actions conflict, truth always belongs to the action. A man may speak of detachment, but his consistency, his patterns, his timing will betray him. If he truly feels nothing, his energy would be neutral. But when care still exists, it moves through action like an undercurrent. He may not reach out directly, but he finds indirect ways to stay connected, liking an old post, sending a casual message, mentioning shared memories without intention. Each act is a whisper of the heart, trying to express what the ego cannot allow. This is the nature of hidden emotion. It cannot remain buried without expression. Human energy is fluid. It must flow somewhere. When the ego resists truth, the truth doesn't disappear. It transforms into behavior, into subtle communication that bypasses the intellect. You can feel it in the way he pauses before speaking your name, or the way he becomes quiet when you are mentioned. Silence, too, is an action. It holds as much meaning as words because silence carries energy, and energy always reveals what the ego hides. Actions are born from attention. Where attention goes, energy follows. When a man's actions still revolve around what once mattered, it shows that his heart remains connected even if his mind denies it. The ego might say, "I've moved on," but the act of remembering, observing, or staying aware is proof of emotional attachment. This is why true detachment cannot be performed. It must arise naturally. The absence of action, the genuine neutrality, only appears when the heart has fully released. Until then, every unconscious action carries traces of unfinished emotion. The ego fears exposure. It fears the world seeing weakness, especially emotional vulnerability. So it creates distance through logic, distraction, or silence. But actions never lie because they arise from instinct, from feeling, not from pretense. When he shows up at the right moment, when he asks about your well-being indirectly, when he still notices the smallest changes in your world, those are not coincidences. They are movements guided by emotional gravity. The pull that exists when connection still holds meaning. The ego may call it coincidence, but energy has its own intelligence, and it moves the body before the mind can rationalize it. The conflict between ego and action creates confusion. People often believe what is spoken rather than what is shown, yet the deeper truth always hides beneath behavior. A man may appear composed, yet his energy feels unsettled. He may act distant, yet his attention remains present. The ego is loud but temporary, action is quiet but consistent. Over time, the consistency of one's behavior reveals the truth of one's heart. You cannot sustain a false action for long without inner conflict. Eventually, the truth leaks out in tone, in timing, in subtle patterns that the sensitive observer can easily feel. When the ego hides longing, it also hides pain. The man who suppresses emotion does not become free of it. He becomes controlled by it in unconscious ways. His mood fluctuates, his focus weakens, his patience shortens because suppressed emotion still seeks outlet. The actions he doesn't understand, like revisiting memories or feeling sudden emotional waves, are expressions of what remains unresolved. The more the ego resists vulnerability, the more energy it takes to maintain the illusion. And this constant resistance drains presence, creativity, and inner peace. To understand actions is to understand truth. Instead of asking what someone says, one must ask, what do they repeatedly do? What patterns remain even when words change? The answer to those questions reveals the heart. When a man misses someone, his ego will craft clever words to convince himself otherwise, but his hands, his eyes, his rhythm will tell the real story. You can see it in his small gestures, in his timing, in his return to familiar ground. The heart speaks through action because it cannot be silenced by thought. Every human being carries this duality. The ego hides, the heart expresses. One fears truth, the other seeks it. To watch a person's actions is to see which one leads. When the ego dominates, actions feel inconsistent. There is avoidance, defensiveness, performance. But when the heart begins to rise, actions become gentler, more intentional, more aligned with care. Even in silence, the energy feels open rather than closed. This shift cannot be faked because energy never imitates authenticity. In relationships, many misunderstand this dynamic. They believe silence means disinterest or that distance means forgetfulness. But often, silence hides inner conflict, the battle between ego's need for control and the heart's need for connection. The man who appears detached may be fighting with himself, trying to suppress the very emotions that make him human. And in that struggle, his actions reveal everything: the late night message, the small act of checking in, the random memory he brings up without reason. These are not accidents, they are the whispers of truth trying to reach the surface. Actions are the language of the soul. They carry vibration, intent, and sincerity. Words are the language of the ego. They carry image, identity, and defense. When you learn to listen to actions instead of words, you begin to see beyond illusion. You start to sense when care still lives beneath indifference, when love hides beneath pride, when the truth still breathes beneath silence. The ego can hide emotions behind logic, but the body always remembers and behavior always reveals. In the quiet gestures, in the pauses, in the timing of one's return, you find the truth that no amount of pride can disguise. It is the space between words where truth breathes freely, the stillness where emotion finds clarity. Most people misunderstand silence, mistaking it for detachment or disinterest, when in reality, it often holds the deepest awareness. When a man becomes silent, it does not always mean he has stopped caring or that his feelings have disappeared. Silence can be the language of introspection, the act of watching without reacting, the process of understanding before responding. It is not the end of connection. It is the transformation of it into a more mindful form. In a world that glorifies expression, silence feels uncomfortable. People are taught to fill every gap with explanation, to speak quickly before emotion becomes too real. But silence, in its pure form, is sacred. It is where the mind slows down and the heart begins to speak. When a man misses someone, his first instinct may not be to express it. He retreats into silence not because he feels nothing, but because he feels too much. Words become insufficient, and so he turns inward to make sense of what stirs within. His silence becomes a container for emotion, holding, studying, and protecting it from being misunderstood or dismissed. Silence is the mind's way of processing what the heart cannot immediately explain. When a man goes quiet, it often means he is observing his own emotions, analyzing the situation, and searching for balance between impulse and wisdom. He listens to his inner world to understand whether what he feels is longing, attachment, or genuine love. Silence, then, is not a void, it is awareness taking form. It is the period of stillness before authentic action arises. The mind creates words, but the heart creates silence, because silence allows truth to rise without interference. To observe in silence requires strength. It is easier to speak, to act, to distract oneself from what feels uncomfortable. But to remain still and present with emotion demands inner discipline. When he becomes silent, he is not escaping, he is watching. He watches his thoughts as they move, his memories as they resurface, and his reactions as they shift. He studies how much of his feeling is genuine and how much is driven by ego, fear, or attachment. In this way, silence becomes the teacher, the mirror that reflects reality without distortion. Many misunderstand this kind of silence because they expect constant reassurance. But silence has its own form of communication, one that is subtle yet profound. In silence, you can feel attention even without words. The way someone looks at you, the energy that fills the space between you, the calmness that lingers even when nothing is said. These are signs that observation is happening. True silence is not indifference. It is awareness without interruption. When a man is silent, it does not mean he has disconnected from you. It may mean he is deeply connected, but trying to understand what that connection truly means. Observation through silence is also a form of respect. It gives emotion the time it deserves. Rather than rushing to react, silence allows space for truth to emerge naturally. A man who has learned stillness does not speak from confusion. He waits until his words carry clarity. This waiting can be mistaken for emotional distance, but in reality, it is emotional maturity. Silence teaches patience. It reveals whether one's feelings come from love or from loneliness, from understanding or from need. By observing rather than reacting, He allows his heart to separate truth from illusion. In moments of longing, silence becomes even more powerful. When he misses someone, he may not always express it, because silence allows him to feel without losing himself in emotion. He sits with the ache, with the memory, with the questions that follow absence. In those quiet moments, he learns the nature of his own attachment. He sees whether the longing is about the person or about what he experienced through them. Silence shows him what remains real when words and presence are gone. It becomes a test of authenticity. The mind fears silence because it cannot control it. Silence exposes the truth that thought tries to avoid. It brings up emotions that were buried and memories that were suppressed. But within that exposure lies liberation. By observing in silence, he begins to see himself clearly. The patterns he repeats, the fears he hides, the love he still carries. Silence becomes his mirror, showing him both his wounds and his wisdom. Through this quiet reflection, he learns to differentiate between the noise of the ego and the voice of the soul. Silence is also a form of communication between energies. When two people share a real connection, words become less necessary. They begin to feel each other through presence alone. A glance, a pause, a shared stillness speaks louder than any explanation. When a man misses you and remains silent, it does not always mean disinterest. It can mean that he feels too much to translate it into language. His silence becomes his way of staying connected without disrupting the peace of what once was. Sometimes, silence is not the absence of communication, it is the purest form of it. Observation through silence also reveals truth about others. In silence, he watches how the other person behaves when attention is withdrawn. Does their care remain steady, or does it fade with absence? Does connection survive without constant validation? Silence tests the foundation of relationships. It exposes whether they are built on true understanding or on dependency. This quiet observation helps him see what kind of bond truly exists, one that demands or one that flows naturally. Silence is an inward journey. When a man goes silent, he is not disappearing from the world, he is entering it more deeply. He is exploring thoughts that words cannot hold, seeking understanding beyond conversation. This inwardness is not coldness, it is cleansing. In solitude and quiet reflection, he filters out external noise to hear the voice within. And in that space, he often discovers truths he could never find through constant talking. Silence gives shape to wisdom, it transforms emotion into insight. Even in relationships, silence holds sacred purpose. Two people who can sit in silence together without discomfort have reached a level of understanding beyond words. They trust the energy between them more than language. In such silence, connection deepens because it is not dependent on constant affirmation. Silence teaches presence, the ability to simply exist together without needing to prove, explain, or control. It turns love into meditation, transforming attachment into peace. When silence becomes observation, it transforms perception. You begin to see the world not through reaction but through awareness. You notice the unspoken gestures, the micro expressions, the rhythm of breathing, the shifts in energy that happen between people. Observation through silence reveals what noise hides, the truth of intention. It allows one to feel sincerity without being deceived by performance. The more you observe, the more you understand that truth rarely speaks loudly, it moves quietly, like wind through still trees, revealing itself only to those who know how to listen without words. Silence is not absence. It is the presence of awareness so deep that it transcends expression. It is where the observer meets the truth without resistance, where emotions are witnessed without judgment, where the self learns to see rather than to control. It is not a lack of communication, but the evolution of it. Communication through stillness, through energy, through presence that requires no sound to be felt. What we give our energy to, what we notice again and again, becomes a reflection of what lives deeply within us. Attention is the most honest mirror of the heart. It cannot pretend, it cannot disguise itself behind words, and it cannot be forced where emotion does not truly flow. A man may claim that he no longer cares, that he has moved beyond what once mattered, but his attention quietly tells a different story. What he returns to in thought, what still captures his awareness, what continues to pull him inward, even when he tries to resist, all of it reveals the quiet attachments that his words may deny. Human attention is magnetic. It moves toward what holds emotional charge. The mind can attempt to redirect it through willpower or distraction, but attachment exerts a subtler gravity. When a man misses someone, his attention gravitates back toward the person's presence, even if only through memory. He may not reach out, he may not speak, but the direction of his awareness remains fixed. He thinks, observes, checks, remembers, and imagines. These acts are not random, they are expressions of emotional continuity. The heart, even when restrained by pride or logic, still points its compass toward what once brought warmth. Attention is energy in motion. Where it flows, energy amplifies. When a man's attention continuously returns to someone, it nourishes the connection even in silence. Thoughts are a form of communication, and attention is the language through which unseen bonds are maintained. This is why people can feel when someone is thinking of them. The attention carries vibration, and vibration travels. Even across distance, energy moves according to focus. The more one resists thinking of someone, the more energy is given to that very thought. The act of resistance itself becomes attention disguised as avoidance. The ego tries to control attention, but the heart always reveals it. The ego says, "I don't care," yet the eyes wander toward what it denies. The ego says, "I am done," yet the mind replays conversations, imagines scenarios, or searches for traces of the past in small details. This quiet repetition of focus reveals emotional truth. Attention is the soul's confession. It exposes attachment without words. When we observe what consistently draws our awareness, we begin to see what still holds power over us. Sometimes it is not the person themselves, but what they represented: safety, acceptance, understanding, or reflection of self. To understand attention is to understand self-awareness. Many believe attachment is measured by words or grand gestures, but the truth lies in subtle patterns. Who do you think about when you are tired, when your guard is down? Whose opinion still affects your peace? What images or memories rise uninvited when silence surrounds you? These are the reflections of attention that reveal attachment's depth. The more something influences your internal space, the more energy you have unknowingly offered it. Attention, therefore, is not just mental focus. It is emotional investment, the currency of connection. A man may try to redirect his attention toward new pursuits, convincing himself that he is moving on. He might stay busy, surround himself with noise, or distract himself through work or pleasure. Yet, if even in those moments his thoughts circle back to the same person, the same memory, the same emotion, it shows that attachment still lives quietly underneath. True release does not come from ignoring, it comes from understanding. Only by consciously observing where attention goes can one begin to see the invisible threads that tie the heart to what it still desires. Attention reveals not only attachment but also priority. What one values, one attends to. Attention is like sunlight, whatever it touches grows. When a man gives attention to someone even without intention, it shows that she still holds a place in his emotional hierarchy. He may deny it outwardly, but inwardly his awareness continues to orbit around her presence. This is not weakness, it is human nature. The heart attaches to what once made it expand, and the residue of that expansion lingers even when time passes. Attention keeps revisiting because it seeks completion, clarity, or understanding. When attention is given unconsciously, it creates emotional loops. The mind keeps revisiting the same stories, the same moments, unable to let go because the lesson within them has not yet been integrated. The attachment persists not because of the person, but because of the unfinished understanding tied to them. The heart uses attention as a reminder. Look here, there is still something to learn. Each recurring thought is not punishment, but guidance. Attention acts as a spiritual compass, pointing toward where awareness still needs healing. The wise observe their attention instead of judging it. They ask, why does this still hold me? What am I seeking through this memory? In this observation, attachment begins to loosen naturally, because the act of awareness dissolves unconscious fixation. Attention that becomes conscious transforms from attachment into understanding. But when it remains unconscious, it binds. This is why awareness is liberation. The more you watch where your attention goes, the more clearly you see the architecture of your emotional life. In relationships, attention becomes the invisible measure of love. It is not always seen through words or presence, but through consistency of focus. A man who truly cares will naturally notice the small details, the subtle changes, the unspoken emotions. His attention will not waver even when his mouth stays silent. The depth of his observation reveals the depth of his attachment. Conversely, when attention fades, connection begins to weaken. Emotional bonds survive not through declarations but through continuous awareness. What one stops noticing eventually fades from energetic significance. Attention is sacred because it gives life. Wherever it flows, it creates meaning. When a man misses someone, the flow of his attention reveals what his heart values most. He may try to hide behind distractions, but energy always seeks its original resonance. You can tell where someone's heart resides by what repeatedly captures their attention, by what they cannot easily ignore, by what still moves them in moments of quiet. Attachment is never truly about ownership. It is about emotional resonance. Attention is how that resonance reveals itself in everyday life. To observe attention is to see love in its purest, most honest form. It shows where the invisible bonds of emotion still exist, where energy continues to connect two hearts even without communication. The man who gives attention reveals himself without realizing it. His eyes, his pauses, his focus, all are maps leading to what still matters within him. The more he tries to suppress this, the more power it holds, because attention resisted is still attention given. True detachment arises only when attention becomes free, when he can observe without clinging, when he can see without needing to possess, when he can feel without the impulse to control. Attention reveals attachment because it exposes truth beyond words. It shows what the soul has chosen to hold, even when the mind pretends to let go. It is the thread that connects the unseen emotions, the silent longing, the subtle recognition that energy cannot be deceived. In every moment, attention points toward what the heart values most, quietly reflecting the story that pride cannot erase and reason cannot rewrite. At first, longing feels heavy. It stirs the heart, fills the mind with memory, and pulls one toward what seems absent. But when love matures, the nature of missing changes. It no longer becomes a craving for possession or closeness, it becomes awareness. The ache softens into understanding, and the emptiness transforms into presence. True love does not demand constant nearness. It observes, it remembers, it respects distance while remaining deeply connected. Missing, then, is no longer a wound but a window through which the soul learns to see love in its purest form. When a man misses someone, his first reaction is often resistance. He feels the discomfort of distance, and his mind begins to search for ways to close the gap. He might think of calling, of distracting himself, of suppressing the feeling. But when love is genuine, missing does not seek to possess, it seeks to understand. The longing becomes gentle rather than desperate. He starts to observe what the feeling teaches him about his own heart, how much space another soul occupies within him, how deeply presence can shape memory, how connection continues even in silence. Missing becomes mindfulness when he stops reacting and starts observing. Mindfulness means to be fully aware of what is happening without judgment. When applied to longing, it transforms the ache of separation into a meditation on love's nature. Instead of fighting the emotion, he begins to sit with it, to breathe into it, to feel its rhythm. He sees that missing someone is not only about absence, it is about recognition. It is the recognition that something real once touched his heart, something alive enough to leave a mark even when unseen. The feeling of missing becomes a reminder of love's continuity, the evidence that connection transcends physical space. When love matures, it stops chasing. It does not need to constantly reach outward to feel complete. It learns to find peace within the space between two hearts. A man who loves with awareness does not try to escape longing, he allows it to teach him stillness. He notices how memories arise and fade, how emotions shift like waves, how thoughts about the person appear and disappear. In this observation, attachment begins to dissolve and gratitude takes its place. Missing becomes an act of mindfulness, a sacred acknowledgement of what once was and what continues to live quietly within. There is a difference between missing with attachment and missing with love. Attachment says, I want you here to make me feel whole. Love says, even in your absence, I feel you, and I am grateful for what you have given. When a man transforms his missing into mindfulness, he becomes aware of the subtle connection that remains beneath all separation. He begins to feel presence in absence, warmth in memory, understanding in silence. He no longer needs to fill the void with words or actions, because he realizes that the bond exists beyond form. Missing someone with awareness allows the heart to expand instead of contract. The pain of separation softens into compassion, for oneself, for the other, for the impermanence of all things. Through mindfulness, he begins to see that love is not possession. It is participation in another's existence even from afar. Missing no longer hurts because it ceases to be a demand. It becomes a gentle reminder of shared energy. It turns into a practice of gratitude, a meditation on the beauty of connection that once was, and perhaps still is, in ways unseen. This transformation happens only when one stops resisting emotion. When missing arises, the mind tries to fix it, to fill the space, to seek closure. But mindfulness teaches stillness. It asks nothing but observation. When a man sits with the feeling instead of escaping it, he discovers its purity. Beneath the longing, there is tenderness. Beneath the aching, there is love. Beneath the restlessness, there is awareness waiting to awaken. Missing turns into mindfulness the moment he chooses to experience it rather than react to it. In silence, love matures. The stillness of missing gives birth to deeper understanding. He realizes that longing is not punishment but reflection. It shows the capacity of his heart to connect, to feel, to value. Every thought that returns to her, every wave of emotion that arises, becomes a teacher. Through mindfulness, he learns to breathe with it rather than fight it. Each moment of missing becomes an opportunity to return to himself, to anchor his awareness in the present instead of being lost in what was. The beauty of mindful love lies in its humility. It does not demand reciprocity or recognition. It gives space while remaining present in spirit. When a man reaches this level of awareness, his missing becomes quiet. It does not cry out or seek attention. It simply exists as an inner warmth, a silent prayer of gratitude. He may not reach out, but his energy becomes peaceful, his thoughts sincere. The missing turns from longing into blessing. In mindfulness, he begins to see that love never truly leaves. What changes is form, not essence. The person may not be near, but their presence remains woven into his consciousness. Every time he remembers her, every time her energy crosses his mind, he practices awareness rather than attachment. He does not dwell on loss, he observes connection. In this awareness, he learns to hold both love and distance without conflict. This is maturity, the ability to love without needing to possess, to care without needing to control. Missing becomes a spiritual practice when there is love without expectation. It teaches patience, humility, and the art of letting emotions flow without judgment. A man who observes his longing learns more about himself than he ever could through words. He sees how the heart holds memory, how energy travels beyond touch, how connection continues in silence. Missing turns into mindfulness because it awakens the awareness of impermanence. It teaches that everything passes, yet the essence of love remains untouched. The more he practices this awareness, the more peaceful his heart becomes. The waves of missing no longer bring turmoil, they bring calm understanding. He begins to see that the person he misses is not only outside of him. They are within him, living through memory, energy, and growth. The act of missing becomes a bridge to deeper presence. It teaches him how to stay rooted in the moment, how to honor what was without clinging, how to love without needing proximity. Through mindfulness, missing loses its sharpness and becomes serenity. What was once pain becomes presence. What was once longing becomes appreciation. What was once a cry for closeness becomes a quiet recognition that true connection is never broken. When love is real, distance cannot erase it, it can only refine it. Missing turns into mindfulness because love, when purified of need, becomes awareness itself, a gentle, watchful, unspoken acknowledgement that what is real never leaves, it only changes form.